Fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit holds an important position in macroeconomics because it has a great effect on the indicators of macroeconomic performance of a country, such as its inflation or its economic growth, making as a result debt financing and debt management. Fiscal deficit happens when a government total expenses exceed the revenue that it generates. Just like obesity, it is easy to ignore budget deficits because they do not have immediate effects except the clothing size that increases. But in the long term, obesity increases the risk of chronic heart attack or diabetes. Similar to obesity again, deficit is also caused by a lack of control and management on food eating, which is in this case money spending, and that is government spending more than its revenues. Let's put it in the GCC context. As the graph shows, the UAE faces an average fiscal deficit of 10% according to Gulf News, and it's explained by the represented government budget balance. Below, by the orange curve, which represents the UAE, we notice a significant fall in the 2008 crisis and in year 2015-2016, and that is all due to the low oil prices. The reasons behind this phenomenon are described as the following. The demand of oil is down because of a high price for too long. Supply is up because of US shale oil and as well as the return of Libya's production. Therefore, decreased demand and increased supply equals low price. But why didn't this happen before? In the mid-90s, where the UAE saw an incredible economic growth, oil prices were rising sharply because global demand was surging, especially in China, and that's because there wasn't enough oil production to keep up. That led to large high prices. Was being purchased for around $100 per barrel between 2000 and 2014. But as oil prices increased, most of energy companies found it problematic. So they had an idea, which was finding profitable to begin extracting oil from difficult to drill places. Until very recently, that US oil boom had surprisingly little effect on global prices. That's because at the exact same time, geopolitical conflicts were still keeping up in key oil regions. There was a civil war in Libya, Iraq was devastated by the war, the US and European Union slapped oil sanctions on Iran. Those conflicts approximately took more than 3 million barrels per day off the market. Now that everything is changed, which includes Libya and Iraq recovering from civil war, Iran opening up their oil market again, and so on, oil supply increased considerably. To these events, the UAE has taken economic measures. One is implementing taxation.
Taxation. Let's talk about the history of the taxation. During the period of the Egyptian pharaohs, tax collectors were known as the scribes. During the period of the scribes imposed a tax on cooking oil. To ensure that the citizens were not avoiding the cooking oil tax, scribes would closely examine the citizens to ensure that appropriate amount of cooking oil were consumed and the citizens were not using living generated by other cooking process as a substitute for the taxed oil. Today, whenever an economic turbulence occurs, the policymakers implement taxation rates in an effort to stabilize it. But what is a tax? It's a mandatory and required monetary contribution to a country's revenue imposed by a government on diverse activities such as enjoyment, expense, income, and property of individuals and organizations. It might seem a headache of the citizens, but it's usually taken into consideration for the social welfare of the citizens. In other words, it ensures that equal distribution of the resources of all its citizens in a way it doesn't harm the economy. On the other side, it can have other purposes such as generate revenue for the education, infrastructure, and welfare. It can also encourage the behavior change, which means that taxing goods and services may include harm of society and its individuals. From another viewpoint, it can be distributed served between the low class and middle class. In order to avoid inequality, the last purpose can be defined as protecting the local industries, as the taxes is important goods, so the local goods have the chance to purchase their products. The UAE has been known as a tax-free country with massive tax advantages for those who can live and work there. But nowadays, the UAE has been surprisingly toying with the idea of introducing the taxes. The government will be introducing the VAT, valued added tax, in January 2018.
Inflation. The term inflation is originally defining the increase in the amount of money in circulation. However, most economists today use the term inflation to refer only the rise in the price level. So what's inflation? Inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and consequently the purchasing power of currency is falling. For example, if the inflation rate is 2%, then a pack of cigarettes in 2016 cost $3.24. Next year, in 2017, the same pack of cigarettes will cost $3.30. As goods and services require more money to purchase, the implied value of that money falls. Inflation can have both negative and positive aspects. Considering the positive impact, inflation would give those interest rates to go both up and down in response to shifting investment opportunities or savers' preferences, and thus allow financial markets to function in a more normal fashion. What about negative side? High or unpredictable inflation rates are regarded as harmful to an overall economy. They add inefficiencies in the market and make it difficult for companies to budget or plan long term. Inflation can act as a drag on productivity as companies are forced to shift resources away from products and services in order to focus on profit and losses from currency inflation. In this framework, United Arab Emirates is adopting a free market hypothesis in favor of the economy. For that reason, it's being affected directly in any changes that may occur in the wealth of the world in general. United Arab Emirates inflation is majorly influenced by higher fuel prices. Domestic gasoline prices have generally been rising since August, resulting headline inflation. It's expected to see a particularly sharp yearly rise in fuel prices in the first quarter of 2017. Moreover, inflation in the United Arab Emirates moves for the most part in response to other forces that are not under the direct control of the central bank.